Good morning, friends, neighbors, countrymen. Got the old paratrooper. I'm back at it again, and we've got a special guest on Tales of Patrol Base Day. Some of you may know him very well, Colonel Max Krupp, and his long range surveillance. He was a golf company guy. He was a long range surveillance guy. Yeah, our 143rd LRSD guy, uh, Airborne Infantry Battalion commander, SF guy. Now he's a cowboy. And
All right.
and sir, we're really glad to have you here, and appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, no, Jerry, I very much appreciate the invitation, and I'm just excited that you're doing this initiative because a lot of times people will tie their career to their branch or what they did or their terminal rank or whatever. But I always kind of will always consider myself like a LRS guy because I'm just so passionate about that, and that's why I'm excited that you're doing what you're doing, and I appreciate the effort and time and emotion that it takes to do it, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, sir, you were pretty highly appreciated in the Texas Army National Guard, that's for sure. Can you kind of give us your background and how you wound up, and how did the story start?
Well, okay. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and so for all you non-Texans out there or those that are geographically challenged, that's right on the border. And so it's a great place to grow up, but not a great place to raise kids. So I was kind of spending too much time in Mexico instead of high school. And so my parents did some psyops on me and they said, we'd send you to military school, but you're such a wimp, you'd quit. And so they, yeah, they kind of like appealed to my vanity. So I was like, I'll go to military school, bring it or whatever. And so I ended up going to New Mexico Military Institute in high school as a junior and senior. And I mean, it was just that environmental shift. I just loved everything about the military aspect of it. And I was hell bent on getting it in the military ASAP. And so when I was 17, I basically walked the strip mall, kind of wanted to be a Marine. I've always been kind of fond of Marines and their culture and their esprit de corps and their kind of rigidness or just, their look about them. So I walked into the Marine recruiter, and of course, there was two stereotypical good-looking Marines in kind of Class B. And I walked in there and they were on their way out to lunch and I was a skinny little fella or whatever. And I was like, hey, I'm interested in being a Marine. And they're like, whatever, wuss, not gonna happen. We're going to lunch. Come back later. And I was like, what a bunch of jerks. Forget it. Even though I still kind of always secretly was still fond of Marines and always will be. But I walked into the next office over and it was the New Mexico Army National Guard. I didn't really understand. I understood the difference between the services, but I don't really understand the differences between the components. So I walk in there. The guy is as sweet as could be. Staff Sergeant Eddie Burrows. This is in like 1993. He's smoking a cigarette at his desk, and he's like, oh, what can I do for you? You'd be great. Like, what would you like to do? And I was like, well, being in that military school environment, it's all singing cadence about airborne ranger, this and that, just like it is in regular formations. And I was like, I want to be an airborne ranger. So he's like, huh, okay. Old school MS-DOS computer, black screen, green letters. He gets on there, puts a cigarette down, huh. Oh, well, we don't have that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's too bad. Granted, this is the New Mexico National
Yeah,
Guard. I
yeah.
don't, I don't know the difference. And I was like, well, what do you have? And he's like, oh, well, I have air defense. I'm like, well, what's that? He's like, well, you shoot planes out of the sky. I was like, oh, yeah, sign me up. It's on. And so I ended up enlisting and did kind of split option. And so while I was still in high school, I went to basic training and AIT and all that. And I came to the quick realization that air defense and I were not well paired. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I decided that I was going to do everything in my power to kind of go the infantry route. And luckily, I righted myself during high school and, ended up being a pretty good student with a lot of extracurricular activities and received uh, a scholarship to go to the junior college portion for commissioning. And so I was an early commissioning program commissionee out of there. And so when you commission at a 2-year junior college, you have to affiliate with a guard unit and then get your 4-year degree. And then you have the option to stay guard or go active duty.
Yeah.
So I basically selected the college I was going to go to do or as the military units, guard units as a function of that.
Yeah.
And so I only applied to 3 colleges. Colorado, because they had SF, UT, because they had 143rd LRSD, the 49th Armored Division, LRSD, and Texas A&M because of G Company 143rd LRS in Houston.
Good choice.
So SF, I never really heard anything back. I wasn't really passionate about doing Colorado anyway. I'm a Texas guy. LRSD, this is old school, like email was just coming on the scene. I called them and they sent me a paper application where I had to like fill out all this kind of stuff. And the commander at that time was a really, interesting character named Tim McGowan. I don't know if you remember
I've
him
heard the name.
from
Yeah.
back in the day, but he was like an MI guy or whatever. But I submitted my application to him, and he basically wrote me back like 2 months later and like red inked all my stuff. And it was like, you're not tabbed and all that. And I'm thinking like 20 years old in ROTC. Yeah, I'm not tabbed. I was air assault and not airborne. So he like circled air assault question mark. You know what I mean? So basically he told me no. And then
Yeah.
G Company, I never heard anything back. So I was like, my airborne dreams are completely dashed. So I affiliated with 141 Infantry Regiment in San Antonio. And I don't want to besmirch any unit or say anything bad about anybody, but this was a different era. This was
Yeah.
the big guard GWAT. And so I just came out of this military school environment where it was, fitness, who was the best, it was a meritocracy kind of thing. And I showed up to 141 for my first drill, and it was just like a total culture shock. It was
Yeah.
like that
Very
old
shocked.
school guard, eating breakfast tacos, no real anything going on. And so I was like, I am going to get my degree from UT. I went to UT Austin and go active duty ASAP. Thankfully, G Company finally called me and invited me to visit them. And after about 2 months of drilling with 141. And I showed up and they couldn't have been meaner and more dismissive towards me. I mean, they were just like, you're a punk, you're never going to make it here, blah, blah, blah. Everyone was mean. The NCOs were totally mean to me. I was just this butter bar, super like alpha male charged environment. And I saw all these guys and I just wanted to be them.
Mm.
And they had a commander there, but really the most influential officer and ended up being my commander many times over in different units was at that time First Lieutenant Stevens, who was an OCS guy and
Yes, I know him.
retired as a colonel,
Steve.
enlisted in Ranger Regiment. And he was super big and buff, huge dip, the whole Ranger kind of cut from that cloth. And, he was kind of mentory towards me, but still mean. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, I took a PT test, got a 300 or whatever, and they're like, hey, we'll let you come here, but you have to have like a Ranger tab within a year or something, or you're out of here. And he's like, you got to go to IOBC Ranger School ASAP. I was like, well, actually, I'm in college at the time. And he's like, I don't give a shit what you were doing or who you're doing it with. That's what you're going to do. I was like, Roger that. So I disenrolled from UT, or I didn't really disenroll, but I got into ATARS and they lined me up with IOBC and Ranger School. So I actually went to Ranger School as a college student as a lieutenant. So the funny story about that was I was with G Company. We went to JRTC, which at that time was at Fort Chaffee. I
Mm-hmm.
had a non-airborne guy drive my car there. I jumped into JRTC. I left about a week early from that and then drove my car to pre-Ranger. And I started pre-Ranger. I went straight through Ranger School. I graduated on a Friday and I started UT that Monday.
Was Kirby there at pre-ranger?
He was. So he was my pre-ranger instructor, or the OIC, I should
Yeah.
say. And then I ended up kind of doing a little bit of work with Army National Guard Pre-Ranger after the fact.
Do you remember the NCOs that were instructors? You both.
Well, funny you should say that. He wasn't I don't remember any of the instructors, but when I worked there, I worked with a Sergeant E5, Greg Slater, who ended up being a command sergeant major and very
Yeah.
influential in the Guard, a lot of high postings and stuff. And so when I was working at Army National Guard Pre-Ranger, it was very, kind of out of a Connex garage kind of vibe.
Were
And
you
it was
still over at the engineer barracks?
No, we were actually at RTB. So
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
so actually when I went to Pre-Ranger, it was like one of the first times where they carved out, a section of RTB, and I did Pre-Ranger there, and that short time that I worked at Army National Guard Pre-Ranger was out of RTB under the HHC. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got in. And G Company to me was the most special kind of unique unit with this amazing esprit de corps. And it was G Company against the world. And I just loved every bit of it. And when I graduated from UT, it was like, am I going to go active duty? And, heaven forbid, have to go mechanized or something like that. I was already a first or second lieutenant, or maybe a first lieutenant at that point. I was Ranger qualified. I was Jump Master Pathfinder EIB. I was like, this is pre-GWAT. I was like, I got everything I need and want and love here. I'm staying put. So I forwent my active duty career and stayed with G Company. And lamentably, shortly after that, they ended up deactivating, which was such a punch in the gut for everyone that was a card carrying G Company member, because these guys loved their unit and the guys that were in the unit. And it was just such a special Guard experience in the 90s. I don't think there was anything quite like it. In fact, when they were actually deactivating us, the state headquarters came down and basically we're offering these guys whatever they want: direct commission, OCS, you want to go to physician assistant school. And the vast majority of them were like, go to hell. I'm leaving the Guard or ISTing, interstate transferring, because you are taking my unit and I'm voting with my feet. And so a couple guys went SF in Mississippi. A lot of them went a bunch of other places. Some went into the Navy. Some became SEALs, all this other kind of stuff. And I was intent on going to Mississippi too, because I was so crestfallen about them deactivating my unit.
mm-hmm.
But luckily, I was like one of the only like Ranger qualified jump master officers that there were in the entire Texas National Guard, because at
Yeah,
that juncture it was an armor state. So they offered me the XO position at LRSD, and I readily jumped on that. And then also at that time was lucky enough that this is right around the September 11th timeframe, got on with the Special Operations Detachment under the Counter Drug
mm-hmm.
Program, where Captain Stevens and Major Stevens was my commander at that point. And so I kind of became, for lack of a better term, active duty at that time while I was the LRSD commander.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what kept me in Texas. It's funny how these little things can change the whole trajectory of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's life. It
Yeah.
is. It is. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Could you tell us about 143rd? During that time frame, and
So yeah. So at that point, the Texas Army National Guard, at its zenith, which I think was in the 70s or maybe early 80s, they actually had an airborne brigade.
mm-hmm.
And then it got whittled down to an airborne battalion. And then when I came on the scene in the mid to late 90s, you basically had G Company and the 143rd LRSD, which was the 49th Armored Division, LRS. And so,
Pathfinders had already went away.
yeah.
Yeah,
What had already gone away?
the Pathfinders had already went away.
Yeah, so 1136 Pathfinder Detachment, which a lot of G Company guys started there,
Yeah,
they went away long before. In that interim period, I think the post airborne battalion in the 70s, you had the Pathfinder Detachment, G Company, and LRST. When I came on the scene, it was only two, and then I became the commander of a long range surveillance detachment, which I think at most with attachments we had 60 people. So
yeah,
we went I don't know what it was, 5,000 paid parachutist positions to during my tenure, 60. And
Yeah.
so I was always trying to be a good advocate for the airborne community. Uh, and, LRSDs were, there's a good cast of characters in there and no,
Yeah.
we're getting in trouble, but they liked kind of training hard. And so I always did my best to try and advocate for that. But, really the Texas airborne community had their back against the wall at that point.
Yeah. Well, the same great about LRSD is you have eccentric individuals, but they're highly capable,
Yeah, and motivated. I mean,
motivated, and
what,
serious about training.
yeah, what we ask of our guardsmen in the contemporary environment is incredible, but really the guys that we had back in those days, there was no like TDY paying for your travel. If you weren't in the field, you slept in your car. We'd bring guys in 3 or 4 days early before drilling that sometimes they wouldn't even get paid. They would just eat it. They were just so
Yeah.
dedicated to the mission and the unit and their teammates that's the kind of things that they would do.
Yeah. When I worked at Pre Ranger, they came and dropped a Ranger student off. These two guys were from Michigan, and they
Mm-hmm.
were F Company guys up there.
The
They
25th, yeah.
lived in Georgia. I was like, guys, we got H Company right over here. It's like, no, we like you guys, but we're F Company guys. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it was like gang affiliations.
yeah.
All the gangs were friendly because it was like LRS against the world.
Yep.
You had all your detachments at all these division headquarters. I think the Guard has 10 division headquarters or did at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So they had 10 LRSDs and three LRSCs, Georgia, Michigan, and Texas before they all deactivated. Those were the first to fall. But all those guys had a community amongst themselves and
Mm-hmm.
swam in the same circles. And so even though they'd strongly advocate for an out of state LRS unit or person,
Yeah.
they were a card carrying member of their
Yeah.
regiment and their state. And that's the way it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there was kind of a story floated around Charlie Company LRS and 143rd when we stood the battalion up about a water jump you all did in the because you're serious about training and wanting to train, and the Air Force could not come up with an aircraft.
Yeah.
And the story is that you made that water jump happen.
Yeah, that is a true story.
Kind
Um,
of
but
elaborate on that.
absolutely. So, one of the biggest things that used to be like a burr under my saddle when I was a LRSD commander or even an airborne battalion commander later in life is, all the kind of used to be's, never was's, wannabes. They'd always be like, "Oh, that's a jump club. You just jump and blah blah blah." It was like really irritating to me because I'd look at their training schedule and I mean, it's like it didn't involve anything that was arduous or tied to their respective medal. And so the discipline and the focus, much of which Captain Stevens and others instilled in me in G Company, is like we are training for the LRS mission, and we're going to be experts at this craft. And so I carried that to LRSD, and so the training calendar throughout the year was pretty predictable because you only have 12 times that you can get together, including annual training. But we basically twice a year would do 3 MUTA 6s in a row.
Yep.
We do one that was nothing but isolation planning, ISOFAX, isolation facilities, full, I mean, mission packets, my mission concept briefs, culminating in a brief back. I mean, these guys are up all night doing all that kind of stuff, and I'm taking all the briefs. So that was like IDT 1. IDT 2 was nothing but infiltration. So basically, these guys would just infiltrate, basically doing a star course on Camp Swift, for a 14K infill and
Mm-hmm.
basically establish their hide sites and mission support sites or whatever. So that's IDT 2. And then IDT 3 was all surveillance actions on the objective where we would have, activity at an intersection or whatever, and they would utilize commo to report back. So it was a grind. It was hard on these guys.
Yeah.
And so I did that twice a year, but I would say, this is our mission. This is what we're going to do. But we're going to do a water jump in August or whatever month it was. And I mean, that's going to be y'all's reward for,
All the hard
for
work.
all the hard work. And so, of course, Texas in August or July or whenever it was, damn state's on fire. So all that, I mean, there's a lot of planning and logistics that goes into doing a water jump, as most of the listenership probably knows, from not only laying on the aircraft, that's just like step one, but getting a water DZ survey, laying on all the Zodiac F470s, doing your wet silt training and having
Yeah.
safety swimmers, all that kind of stuff. So we had it all locked in, and like the aircraft fell out like maybe 2 weeks or a week before. And we called every air wing, Marine CH-53s, everything. I mean, I never say die. And everything was kind of going, yes, no, okay, we can't do it or whatever. And we got to like the day or two before, and I was like, I cannot get Mil Air to support this. So I used some disciplined initiative, and I took a 57-220 static light parachuting techniques, tactics, and procedures. But I didn't take the most recent version. I took a version from like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And
Oh,
there was a U-8 Seminole in there, Uniform -8 Seminole, I believe was the nomenclature, which is basically a fixed wing aircraft, which Skydive San Marcos, which is, in Central Texas,
yeah.
happened to have. And so I basically rented that aircraft, and we took the old manual and essentially like a Huey or a UH-60. I think we rigged a donut in there or something like that. And it only fit like 3 guys at a time, or maybe 4. And you're crammed in there like sardines because it's a skydiving aircraft,
Yeah, it's not a
not a
tack.
lot of room with the reserve and the mains. But we took off at a Canyon Lake, and they basically were like, "Yeah, you can have it for as long as you want, but you get charged by the hour." I was like, "I don't give a shit. We're all in." So we had to basically load up the whole detachment, 4 jumpers at a time, and then the runway basically goes right over the lake, and then you have the DZSO in the water and all the boats. But what was driving me crazy, I was a young man at this time, kind of not hand to mouth, but I spent a lot of money on things that I probably should have. So
Yeah,
we'd have jumpers like drift far away, like out of the DZ area, and the boat would have to go recover them because you have to recover all the jumpers before the next pass can load
yeah.
up. So the thing ended up being like way longer than I anticipated, but I didn't give a damn. And it was a huge credit card bill. I mean, I basically pay with my credit card, but I didn't really, I don't think I lied about what we were doing. I just didn't divulge to
All
hire
the
that I'm,
detail.
physically procuring this aircraft with my own funds. And, that next Monday morning, I got a call to report to the division headquarters. And I was like, well, this is it. I'm getting a bullet between my eyes. And General Furlow, who was a airborne guy, loved jumping and loved paratroopers. He called me in there, and I was like, "Oh my god, even he can't fade the heat for this. This is
Yeah.
so egregious." But he called me in there. I was fully expecting to get relieved in the whole shooting match.
Yeah.
But he just surprised me and was like, I wish I had 100 of you. He had all these other like field grades in there. And he's basically just told, furlough is ranger tabbed and all that kind of stuff. And he's just like, you know what we need? He's like, we need 100 guys like this that's willing to try and put his neck on the line to make stuff happen instead of you guys that are always in the can't do category and all that. So basically, I walked out like scot free with like a $5,000 bill. But I was happy to keep serving, and I did. I was in LRSD for quite a while after that.
Well, when I left the battalion, which was a 2021, I mean, that story it was still told. It got embellished a little bit too,
I'm
probably.
sure it did,
Yeah.
yeah. But
So,
but it was a good time. I don't think anybody could pull that off nowadays and
no. Oh,
not get shot in the face. Yeah.
but yeah, you would get cut to pieces. I mean, I want to say I saw a film with AT. Y'all went to Puerto Rico one time for a water.
That was right after I left.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Jeff Hook, you probably don't remember him, but I remember him talking about it and showing me pictures on it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
So
I was in the Q course at that time. Yeah.
how'd you wind up in SF? Because Texas didn't have SF until when did that stand?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, basically, after my time in LRSD, I basically went to Afghanistan for 14 months as a ETT embedded team trainer for the Afghan National Army. And then I came back, and I mean, really nothing was appealing to me. I kind of had that post airborne career hangover.
Mm-hmm.
We were still
What am I gonna do?
mechanized. We were still mechanized at the time. I was pretty much looking down the barrel of being like a battalion S3 and with Bradley. So I was kind of bummed out about that. And he used to be the state legal counsel. He's a lawyer on the civilian side, SF guy named Colonel Doug O'Connell. And he ended up becoming the G3. And so he was really instrumental in setting up the architecture for us to get like an SF company. So, the state was completely ignorant, not in a bad way, but just they didn't know what it took to make that and how it works or whatever. And they're like, oh, we'll get a bunch of people to IST because so many Texans go to Mississippi or Colorado or wherever. They're like, well, how do we grow our own? And he explained the whole like got to go to selection year-long Q course. And they're like, oh God, that sounds kind of like hard to do because all they cared about was recruiting and retention and
Yeah.
MLSP and stuff like that. Well, they're like, do we have anybody that we could send? And O'Connell just hollered at me. He's like, you want to do this? And I was like on the precipice of already getting promoted to be an S3
Mm-hmm.
in tech. And I I basically threw that in the trash. I was like, let's do it. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I went to selection with like maybe 5 weeks notice.
Woo.
Um, yeah, and the way they pulled it off is I was assigned in United States Army South. They moved me into an 18 Alpha billet there,
Mm-hmm.
and then they sent me because the in the guard mentality is like, well, he needs to be in a slot to go to MOSQ, so they
Mm-hmm.
shoehorned me in there. I went to selection, which was great because uh, I went to selection and it was like a LRS homecoming. All the guys that I knew in all these different LRSDs, both guard and active duty, um, were in my selection class, and even the instructors were like, "You guys get behind these LRS guys and you'll be okay." Because we were just, it was we were just your kind. LRS is essentially in my one of my Q course instructors told me this. He's like, LRS is like tactical SF. Like the
Mm-hmm.
LRS guys thrive in the SF environment because it's all that, detailed mission planning, long infiltration, special infiltration techniques, strategic reconnaissance is one of their mission sets. And so I went to selection and then I came back and they're like, well, what do we do with you now? And they're like, oh, we sent them to the Q course. So I was in the Q course before we even had SF.
Wow. Did they just send you straight to selection, or did they run you through SOP C?
There we go.
There we go. We got back. We had our little technical glitch.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I think that's on me, everybody. I apologize. I live out
oh
in the
no, no, no.
country and I got a blinking light, and I think the internet died for a bit. But okay. So where were we, Jerry?
Yeah, you're in the Q course. Everybody's like, "Who do you belong to? 19th, 20th?"
Yeah, and I basically I didn't have a group. I was pretty sure it was going to be 19th, so I just volunteered for Spanish to make it as easy as possible. And but I was so hell bent on graduating the Q course the same way I was in Ranger School. I wanted to be in G Company so bad. They
Mhm.
could have kicked me out of UT and stolen all my deposit, and I wouldn't have cared. I would have stayed there for 18 months to graduate Ranger School. Same thing with Q course. I was like, Texas SF is on my shoulders. That was my mentality. I was
Mhm.
like, I got to get my stuff. And so I basically was the first Texas Guardsman to graduate the Q course. And frankly, it was really satisfying because a lot of the state leadership came to my graduation
Wow.
and it really kind of helped. I don't know how to say this, but like it kind of helped them appreciate not just the special forces thing, but that whole airborne paratrooper ranger kind of SF subset within the reserve component.
Mhm.
It kind of lifted their spirits on that to some of the potential naysayers. And really we kind of entered the golden era of airborne in the Texas National Guard, where it used to be the brigade, but it ended up culminating in we had a LRS company, we had a rigger company, we had an airborne battalion, we had two special forces companies,
Mhm.
and a special operations detachment Africa at the zenith. So we got over almost 1,000 paid parachutist
Yeah.
positions So we were like a Compo 2 airborne force guard wide.
How long were you in 19th group, sir?
Um, Longer than I was supposed to be, because, like I said, I had to turn down promotion to major 3 years in a row. And I basically got promoted to major the day before they would have kicked me out of the Army for being a captain for too long. Because I mean, I went SF late in my career, and I wanted to get the maximum amount
Yeah.
of team time to credential myself and learn my craft and all that. And so that's what I that's what I did. So I was in 19th group for quite a while. I was a free fall team leader in one company, and then they stood up the second company that we
Mhm.
got, and I became the commander of that.
Now, did you deploy with those guys overseas or?
So it was kind of interesting. We That was a weird time in SF Force Generation where we kept missing our like quote GWAT deployment. So
Mhm.
basically, when I was a team leader, I mean, we went all over the place from Europe to Asia, to Middle East, J sets and stuff like that. Some of them were under the GWAT umbrella,
Mhm.
but it wasn't like a quote combat tour. And then when I went to Charlie 119 as the commander, we had a Far Asia
Yeah.
focus. And so
Working with first group. Yeah.
we spent the vast majority of time in places like Cambodia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Korea, or whatever. But then it started picking up, and the companies started getting into combat rotations and stuff. In a lot of different places, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria,
Yeah.
and stuff. So it was good. I'm not really sure what those guys are up to now, but
Well, they've done a lot.
yeah.
And then you kind of had a unique position because the next time I made so you were an SF, I think I remember meeting you at a pre-jump or something like that. And then of course I was in the LRSC company and we were sort of attached and you became the battalion commander for that airborne
Yeah.
battalion.
So that was another funny story. And that's why, I'll always consider myself a guard guy, or excuse me, a LRS guy, but I'm also a proud guardsman because I've just had such a blessed career. And I wouldn't have really changed a thing because I just was afforded so many opportunities and had so many neat experiences while being an Army National Guardsman. But yeah, essentially, the 143rd Airborne Battalion at this time, which Colonel O'Connell was the initial battalion commander of, the guy
Hmm.
that SF to Texas. Um, I was the third battalion commander there. The guy in between us had just taken them to Afghanistan, and they had
Yeah.
just come back. And I think there was a lot of, whatever. Whenever you
I,
go on the, yeah,
I was on that deployment and then I
yeah.
got promoted and went back to Charlie Company.
Yeah. So there was, I mean, bottom line is, Joe's gonna Joe. And I think I think the guys did great overseas, but the overall reputation with the state was damaged in some way, shape, or form just because of the normal shenanigans of what happens when people go overseas or whatever. And so the second battalion commander, whose name was Sean McGrath,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, Bloodbath McGrath. Uh,
Bloodbath.
he uh, he uh, he brought him back, and then he was on the short final for retirement. And so General Brown, Red Brown, who was the division commander, or incoming division commander, he called me on a sat phone when I was in Asia, and he's like, "You're going to be the next 143rd Battalion Commander." And I said, "Fucking Roger that. I'm all about it. I'm
Yeah.
coming home." I was all about it. And so I was super excited about it, but it was really, I think I was well suited for that job at that time because I had always kind of had to swim against the current fighting for the airborne community
Mhm.
on a smaller scale when my company grade time. And at this point, like, people go with which way the wind's blowing. So like the whole battalion, everyone's like, oh, it had a bad rep, jump club, all that nonsense, which it had the best NCOs and junior officers, hands down, of any unit I've ever been in,
Yeah.
period. Yeah. And so I was like, that is an inaccurate statement. It's fake news. And so they were basically they didn't so much tell me, but it was almost tongue in cheek, like, you're probably going to be the last commander of this unit because we're actively shopping this thing out of here.
Yeah.
And so there was no way I was going to let that happen on my watch. And that was my best assignment in 28 years of service, was being a battalion commander in that unit. It was the most enriching experience. And we had, I mean, a hell of a lot of fun. We did a hell of a lot of good stuff. And oddly enough, it was the first time I'd ever had a unit where females were in it, because I had a FSC.
Yeah.
And so that was a kind of a new thing for me. But I mean, when you're doing a mass tack uh, at 1,000 feet with 7 airplanes, and I have a female cook from Comanche, Texas, that's jumping behind me, I mean, I just think that's cool. And so, like, we had that same methodology where we did a lot of hard training and tried to keep it by the book from a medal RTEP perspective, but we had a lot of fun too, and it was really the highlight, or one of the highlights of my career.
Well, I tell you, I thought the S1 shop had some of the best, the S1 NCOs, and they were all female. They were great.
Yeah, I mean, it's that paratrooper culture, at least in my humble opinion, that if you're an S1 in an airborne battalion, to me, there's an expectation that you are to be a better S1 than in some other kind of battalion. That's why you're in the airborne battalion, because you're the expert at 42 Alpha Jazz. And so because you can do that and you're willing to take the risk of jumping out of a plane, it attracts better people, or
Better
people that
quality
are
people.
willing to go the extra mile. And that's why I always enjoyed serving in airborne units, because that kind of camaraderie, not to say it doesn't exist other places, but it's just kind of a special to me as paratroopers.
I think the airborne battalion was set up because with the LRSC company, because we were Charlie Company third, 124th Cav by then.
Mm-hmm.
We had grown so many great NCOs, but there's only so many E6, E7 slots. The
Yeah.
airborne battalion got a great place for people to go to.
Yeah. And what's funny is that lineage lived. I mean, excuse me, in the 143rd Airborne, there was still a handful of G Company guys in there,
Yeah,
bunch of LRSD guys, one or two guys from 1136 Pathfinders. Jesse
yeah,
Kennedy comes to mind.
yeah.
And
So
so that airborne legacy, it kind of stayed. And then we began to cultivate it more and more, where, it used to just be a handful of us. And then we had like a battalion full of us. And I always viewed, or at least it was my goal, that the 143rd was kind of like the leadership factory for the Texas Army National Guard. You
yeah.
might not become the battalion commander of the 143rd as a company commander, but you're going to go be a battalion commander somewhere else and take that mindset and that discipline. Same thing with platoon sergeants, first sergeants, sergeants major. So,
Well, like I said, I wound up back in the 143rd. I wound up being the mortar platoon sergeant, even if
mm-hmm.
he had already left.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just needed an obnoxious E7 who wasn't afraid to like piss people off. And
Yeah.
and then from there, I went over third 144th to be a first sergeant. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's good.
yeah,
Same methodology. Not everyone can stay in Ranger Regiment on the active side their entire life.
no,
And so those guys go out and go to different divisions and do great things, and they bring some of those TTPs, they bring some of that innovative training methodologies and just overall discipline and commitment to those units, that, not saying that it was absent, but that it's enhanced when those guys go there. And that's how I felt the 143rd positively infected sister formations.
well, like my impression every time a Texas airborne unit went somewhere, we impressed people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was yeah. I mean, it was people were like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So
It was it's to me, it was it's G Company exploded. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Same mentality. Like we're gonna do the best. Like I don't care if it's cleaning the latrines or it's doing a complex multi-day operation. We're gonna give 100% and then some in whatever we're doing. I don't
Yeah.
care if I'm a stockbroker, work at Dairy Queen, or if I'm AGR, I'm all in on
Yeah.
this endeavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing now, were you when 143rd became part of the 173rd Airborne Brigade? I can't remember if you were you still there when we patched
No,
over.
I just all the architecture was getting put in place, and then I hit I think 2.5, 3 years of command, and they're like, "Yeah, you got to move out." But then my XO Kurt Sear, who's a
Yeah.
great dude. He took over and he was a former Ranger Regiment guy, and he was very well suited to
Oh yeah.
incorporate him into the 173rd and actually became the DCO of the 173rd after he finished his time at the 143rd.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was really kind of the high water mark, I think, of the 143rd. I've kind of lost a little bit of touch on what's going on. I even understand that the unit may be deactivating or transferring states or something like that, which to me would be, my absolute guard nightmare. It's basically everything I tried to not only preserve, but hopefully expand. And if that unit was to leave, I mean, it would be a bone crushing reality for me for that not to be in the state.
I think there was some jealousy with the rest of the state because we all wore that 173rd patch, and that was
Yeah, I mean,
everybody.
it's just petty. And me, I'm of the mindset is like I'm a proud former Texas guardsman, but what I thought made Texas so great is you could go to that state because some states, like when I enlisted in New Mexico, there was air defense and that was it. There
Yeah.
was a support stuff, that was it. That's all you could do. You could come to Texas and be any branch that the United
Yes.
States Army had less civil affairs, and even a handful of those MTO slots and division headquarters and
Yeah.
stuff. So it literally covered down on every branch. But like, if I'm a young person that wants to enlist and I want to be a deep sea salvage diver in the engineer brigade, I
Uh,
want to have that available to that person. Or if you want to be a Green Beret, great. You want to be an airborne rifleman, great. You want to be a tanker, great. We had all that.
yeah.
And what made the airborne battalion so special is we had the only one, at least in my era, in the guard at the time. So we were harvesting people from Montana, Wyoming, Florida, Michigan,
Oh yeah.
Massachusetts. They were coming to us, and to throw all that away to me is unconscionable, particularly if it's because people are, have jealousy or are petty enough to they didn't want to go that route, so no one else should either.
Yeah. Well, it is, and I was. I'd say the Texas National Guard was an awesome experience for me. Without,
Mhm. And you were in a bunch of different guards.
yeah, yeah, I was. I mean, I was with Georgia Lurst Company. I was in Nebraska Lurst Detachment, a 20th Group refugee. Uh,
Mhm.
all great, and Texas Guard it was like home,
Yeah.
and I it really I didn't like leaving the Texas National Guard, but it is what it is, and
Yeah.
I was heartbroken when you retired. I mean,
Well, yeah, we were ships in the night. We'd see each other at, because the
yeah.
other fun thing about having a bunch of different airborne units is, sometimes you do proficiency jumps and you get to kind of catch up with people that are not in your formation. And it's kind of fun because you're all on the same team. You just wear a different patch.
Well, yeah. I mean, like when we went out to Golden Coyote in South Dakota, that
Uh-huh.
Lurs got to go out and Lurs, and 143rd got to 143rd, and the cross decking of personnel, it was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, that was a fun trip.
Well, like I said, you unfortunately retired. We were rooting for you,
Well, thank you. I know.
but tell us now about what you're doing because you're a cowboy.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to be. I'm basically in my twilight years in the Army, after I got done commanding Special Operations Detachment Africa, that was, kind of my last MTO and E assignment. And then I I married my wife who's from North Texas, and I've always enjoyed helping her dad kind of run cattle. I like the ethic of it. I like the Western ethos. I like working hard and feeling good about what you did at the end of the day. And so I always enjoyed helping him. And so I started my own herd, and I started selling beef direct to consumer. And so I'm the owner operator of Halo K Cattle. So my brand here is the K, with the quarter circle over it. And somebody was just like, "Oh, it's like a halo over the K, and you're a Halo guy." And I was like, "That's a damn good idea." And so that's how Halo K Cattle was born. It was just K for Krupp. I started Halo K Cattle, and so I basically specialize. I do a bunch of other stuff, but I I raise my own. I basically raise my animals from conception to consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in charge of my own breeding. I supervise all the calving, and then I retain a lot of my heifers to expand my herd, and then I raise my steers up how the customer wants, and I sell them direct to consumer. And so they get the opportunity to basically know where their beef is coming from. And a lot of people, I think, are interested in buying from a guy that's a one-man ranch. A lot of people don't know that 85% of the cattle industry is controlled by four meat packers.
Yeah.
So one was owned by China and one's owned by Brazil. So uh, they're buying Texas born, pasture born and bred beef, and they're buying it directly from me. Like I said, it's consumption, or it's conception to consumption. I mean, I'm the guy that's trailering it to the processing facility and the whole shooting match. So I'm with that animal its entire life. And that's kind of what I do now. And I take a lot of gratification in what I do. And my last couple of years in the Army were all inside, running from meeting to meeting, not even having the chance to go to the bathroom. Now I basically work outside every day, and I can go to the bathroom wherever I want. So
So basically, what you're telling me, sir, is your cattle are raised with gentleness, although they might have been cursed once in a while.
that's another one of my things that I do. There's exceptions to every rule, but part of what I do, and I think consumers appreciate this too, is I do nothing but honestly gentle handling techniques. I mean,
Yeah.
I basically have these things raised in a manner where if they see me, they come to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't use hot shots. I don't use cattle dogs. I don't holler at them. I don't hit them. I run them through the chute when they want to kind of go. I mean, I'll pressure them a little bit when things are slowing down, but like I try to give those animals a good life. So opposed to a guy like me raising them and then selling them to a backgrounder and then them going in a feedlot and eating for 120 days in confined feeding.
My dad was he was very gentle with his cattle. And then my Uncle Don, who was a screamer. Yeah, it's I'll tell you that story one of these days. But yeah.
But the thing is, like for all the jump masters out there, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. The more you holler and try to get cattle to do something under pressure, it's going to take you 10 times longer because they're not going to cooperate. Yeah. So I mean, I just basically sometimes it goes slower than I'd like it to go, but I guarantee when I start putting the turning the screws on them, it definitely takes longer than I'd want it to go because they go left when I want them to go right, and they go backwards when I want them to go frontwards. So,
Well, two things always make me scared: jumping on the antelope drop zone at Fort Hood,
and
and
that's my number one most hated drop zone. I can't believe it's considered legitimate.
for for the viewers don't know, the thing is literally covered in piles of rocks.
Yeah, I mean, even at night, you can see the hazard because it's basically crunched up like Jersey barriers or something. They're
Yeah,
like half acre big.
yeah.
So I don't care if you're the best static line slipper. Sometimes you're destined to land on that. And I just never liked that at all.
But two things scare me: antelope drop zone and an open gate while I'm working cattle.
I can't tell you how many times I'll wake up at 2 in the morning and be like, did I close that gate? I literally will get out of bed and like walk a mile and just make sure it's shut.
Yeah,
I won't be able to go back to bed because for
yeah.
people that don't know, sometimes when you get them where they don't, where they shouldn't be, it's real hard to get them back to where they should be, especially if you're a one-man ranch. Yeah.
Well, I remember one time me and my dad, we lost a cow for 2 months. And the only way we found it, she had went off into the brush, had a
Uh-huh.
calf, and I happened to be driving by the road one day, and I see a black Angus head stick its head out,
Uh-huh.
and a little calf beside. I was like, "Oh, there's 37."
Yeah.
Been looking
Yeah.
for.
And they all have their kind of own personalities,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is kind of neat. When you're up close with them, you kind of know kind of how they tick. Some will eat right out of your hand, and other ones they don't want to have you close to them. It's just kind of different.
Well, hey, sir, I tell you what, I'm going to probably kind of wrap this up here. It has been great talking about your career and the history and the Texas Army National Guard and airborne works. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, I really appreciate you finding it fit to invite me on the show. So thank you. And thank you, like I said at the beginning, thank you for what you do. Keep this history alive. People think that LRS is gone, it'll come back. Because in this era where everything's technological and all that kind of stuff, somebody can flip a switch and everything that you had doesn't work. And the only way that you're going to be able to get the info that you need is going to be the traditional ways in which the original LRS and LRP operator was trained.
You can't do everything with a drone. That's for
No,
sure. That is for sure. But we'll see what happens. And we need to get you into the Long Range Reconnaissance Association. I'm gonna.
I assure you, I shall join Ricky Tick.
All right, and rally is in June. Is it June? I think June.
Where
But
is it?
it's in Branson, Missouri. It's about 30 minutes from me.
Oh, how convenient. Nice. Okay. Very cool.
All right. Hey, friends, neighbors, countrymen. Again, we want to thank Colonel Max Krupp. And for those of you out there, continue to train, watch your six, and God bless America.
Cool.